Hey, it's Lucas, aka Fox from Inferno Fox Gaming. The OG Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Entertainment System was the first video game I played for that said system when we got it back in May of 1987. Besides Final Fantasy IV, Super Mario Bros. Is one of the most ported and remade video games ever. And today, I'm just going to go through as many of the versions of Super Mario Bros. That I've played, and even some variations that I'd not heard of before looking into this. And if you like content like this, retro gaming, RPGs, and the like, make sure to click the like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. So let's start off with the OG, the original NES version. And there's actually quite a few different versions of this. We, of course, have the Japanese or Famicom version released September 13th of 1985. That was then ported to here in North America, the good old United States, in October of 1985. We ended up getting the Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt combo pack, and that, of course, was a pack-in title for the OG NES. But there was also another sort of combo pack. It was the Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt and World Class Track Meet combo pack. That one released December 1st of 1988. What was cool is, this is the first time I'd heard of it. There was a Super Mario Bros. Tetris Nintendo World Cup combo pack that I think was the European Union, or in Europe only, in November 1st of 1988. And I would say out of all of these, I would have preferred that, because I was a huge Tetris fan, and it would have just been great to have Tetris and Mario all on one sort of cart. I'm not worried about soccer or football or however you want to call it, but just having Mario and Tetris were great. Duck Hunt was good too, but also another version that released around this time was All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros., releasing December 1986. This was based on a Japanese radio program called All Night Nippon, and this game in particular celebrated the 20th anniversary of the program. Now, this game is extremely rare, the physical copies. It was sold on like a lottery system, and only 3,040 copies were released. Within the game itself, there are a number of graphical edits, such as the first world being and taking place during nighttime. All the Toads and Princess Toadstool sort of became different characters, and even gameplay. Like, there's a Mario or Luigi selection, kind of similar to what Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan only was, i.e. Lost Levels, and even some levels from that too, like 8-4. And also, if you beat this All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. 8 times, because you got to do that in Super Mario Bros. 2, it unlocks worlds A through D, though there is no world 9 if beating the game 8 times without warping. Now, another version of Super Mario Bros. Would be Versus Super Mario Bros., which released January of 1986. And this is actually the arcade cabinet version of Super Mario Bros. And essentially what this is this wasn't exactly a direct port of the OG, though there are a great number of levels that come from it. As Mario progresses through the game, there are subtle differences and changes to the overall levels. The reason on this is Shigeru Miyamoto, when he was working on this port, he wanted to throw in a change or two, make it a little bit harder, because quarter munching is a real thing. You got to get the players to keep jumping in. The idea of making a harder version of the OG Super Mario Bros. Really caught his attention, captivated him. So this was really the antithesis of Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan, i.e. Lost Levels, as we know them in North America that way. But that's where the idea of such a horrendously difficult version of Super Mario Bros. Came from, and that's really just like the overall idea of that. And whenever I'm at any sort of arcades myself, such as the Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois, here within the Chicagoland area, or video game conventions, I always try and find Versus Super Mario Bros. Because it's such a cool relic, and always makes me hope that Nintendo at some point will want to have physical copies of their arcades, a la Arcade 1-Up. Another version of Super Mario Bros. Is a PC port. And it may not be what you're thinking. It's called Super Mario Bros. Special for the NEC PC8801 and Sharp X1 computers, released August of 1986. This is interesting because it was developed by Hudson Soft and it was Nintendo licensed. And what's odd about it is there's single screen movement. The colors are a little kind of off. The game looks a little janky, but it is Super Mario Brothers. The idea of it being single screen movement really is akin to how Castlevania 1, the MSX port, was. And insofar as there were a number of liberties and changes to Mario Brothers Special as well, such as the addition of enemies from both Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers from the arcade. So you'll run into like those flames, barrels, as well as even the shell creepers and crabs from their respective games. And there's also a hammer power-up, which is pretty cool, but you know, though it's pretty rare. So I had never actually played Super Mario Brothers Special myself any of the OG times, just, you know, through shmemulation. It was a little rough, but you know, it's still a cool concept. The next couple entries are handheld, not Switch handheld. What I'm talking about is the OG handheld Game & Watch. So there's actually two different Super Mario Bros. Game & Watch handhelds. There, of course, was the OG one released June 25th of 1986. And I'm going to be honest, this Game & Watch was a ton of fun to play. Now, my cousin had it, so I never actually owned it myself, but whenever I was hanging out with him, he'd always bring it out and play whatever on his home computer, and I would play the Game & Watch little handheld. It was a ton of fun to be able to maneuver Mario through those sort of like barrier level worlds and everything like that. Overall, though, it was very, very simple in nature, but you know, sometimes having that simplicity or being put into like a box creatively really helps to create some really special experiences. Fortunately, Nintendo knew what they were doing with this, and it ended up a lot of fun. I really can't say the same for a lot of those Tiger experiences. So, I mean, if you like those Tiger experiences, you know, let me know in the comments section below. I mean, I've heard some people like the Street Fighter 2 one. I don't know. But another type of Game & Watch, and this one, of course, is something that you all are perhaps familiar with, and that is, of course, the Super Mario Bros. Game & Watch that was just released November 13th, 2020. And I say just released when it was like about 5 years ago for the 35th anniversary of Super Mario Bros. But this was very, very well done. It was fantastic, not only because it has Super Mario Bros. 1, but it also has Super Mario Bros. 2, the Japanese version, and they look like they're the same versions that appeared on like Virtual Console before, so you know, no real surprises there. It also has like an in-game clock, as well as like the classic ball game is from Game & Watch, but they superimpose Mario's head on the main avatar, and that was the first Game & Watch game. My complaint is that the A and B buttons, when actually using this, are, if you want to actually use it to play, not just have it be a little cool collectible, they're really spongy, and it's not as responsive as like a true A or B button on an NES controller, for example. Another version of Super Mario Bros. That I played was for the Commodore 64, and that released May 6th, 1987. No, this was not, to my knowledge, a licensed version of Super Mario Bros. And in fact, it was a mod of the great Giana sisters, where I don't know who had done it, but they modded Mario to replace said Giana sisters. And one of the things that's interesting about that is Nintendo had sent a not so friendly worded letter to the creators of the Great Giana Sisters as sort of like a cease and desist back in like the late 80s, just to how similar it looks. But my experience was that like the physics were, honestly, it was a little rough. Mario, when he jumps, he feels sort of floaty, but then like if you just walk off a ledge, he drops like a rock. And it almost kind of reminds me of like Fox from Smash Melee, how fast that he falls, and that's how he falls if you're not jumping. And keep in mind, I played this with a joystick where there's only one button, and when Mario gets and it's not a fire flower, it's like a bomb power. the little button just deploys that bomb power. No, you actually have to hold up on the joystick to be able to have Mario jump. And that was pretty crappy because there are a lot of tight spots in the game where precision movement was needed. And honestly, just such a high amount of that precision movement and everything. Overall, it didn't really feel like the fairest of level design. And this fair level design is something that Nintendo absolutely excels at. And honestly, you can kind of tell that this is a fan-made game because of it. So now let's talk about one of the most well-known versions of Super Mario Bros., and that is its remake from Super Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo, released August 11th, 1993. Now, fun fact, the time difference between the US release of the original Super Mario Bros. And Mario All-Stars is 7.86 years. Well, for comparison's sake, let's talk about Horizon Zero Dawn, released on the PS4 February 28th, 2017. If you compare that with its remaster released October 31st, 2024, that's a 7.67 year difference. So for all the talk about Horizon receiving a remake too soon, it's about the same time, about 0.19 difference in years. And I mention this because while there is a somewhat noticeable difference between these two versions of Horizon, the difference is night and day between the OG Super Mario and the SNES All-Stars component. The graphics from the sprites to the levels and the respective backgrounds are a lot more colorful and detailed. The music quality is greatly improved. And of course, there is the ability to save progress by world. There was no saving up in the OG. There are a number of gameplay differences though. Some good improvements include a maximum number of lives actually being able to be displayed, which is 128 versus the original that has odd symbols if you get more than 9 lives. If you die with too many lives, game over. It literally will not progress back. And that's probably one of the many of the issues with the OG is, it's a great game, but it can be a bit glitchy. The nice thing is, again, Mario All-Stars doesn't have near as much of that. The overall physics, though, feel different. I do have to mention that. For example, when you break bricks, when you are Super Mario, if you plow through the bricks by jumping, Mario sort of keeps moving up when breaking the bricks. Whereas in all the other versions of Super Mario Brothers, like the OGs, he rebounds downward more quickly. And what's funny is in Super Mario Bros. 3, in All-Stars, he rebounds quickly down. So I don't understand why. I never really got why the physics were changed with that. But regardless, that was a difference, and just a couple little nuances here and there. The 2-player is much more fair, I will say. Players switch off after completing levels and not when they die. Jamie Owls, she never got a turn when we tried playing the original together. Sorry, hon. And while we're mentioning Super Mario All-Stars, talk about this guy, the Wii version of Super Mario All-Stars. This is the same exact game as the SNES one. It's the ROM, but on a DVD. And you got all that space on a DVD, and it's just a small little ROM is on it. It kind of seems silly, but they released this for the 25th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers. This also came with a small DVD, sort of giving a little bit of the history of Mario. But again, this is the same as the Super Nintendo one. But if we're talking about differences with Super Mario Brothers, one game that really had noticeable differences, at least to me, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color. And it looks really, really zoomed in, which it sort of results in the feeling of enemies coming out of nowhere if you're not familiar with their overall placement, if you're zooming along. Also, it results in being able to move backwards for the first time. Kind of. The limiters of moving backwards are still there from the OG NES version, but you wouldn't know it because the camera, again, it allows Mario to to follow Mario back as he moves. I also noticed that the physics also feel different. Like some people say Mario controls tighter, but I've found it to be off-putting. Kind of the same jump physics because you can't move back as easily once you jump forward, but the overall movement kind of seemed freer. And then certain hitboxes of enemies like piranha plants are different too. Now, one of the things with this version is all the additional content that they have, such as there's a challenge mode where Mario needs to find like red coins and Yoshi eggs. There's a race mode where Mario challenges Boo to go from the beginning to the end of a level, and like you actually, wholly unique levels. There's Super Mario for Super Players. That's the worlds 1 through 8 of Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan. Though it's a little bit of a disappointment it doesn't have World 9 or A through D. There's also the ability to switch between Mario and Luigi at any time of the original game, and you can save as well. There's like this little world map that appears when right before you start a level. And there's even additional stuff like a photo album for printable pictures of the Game Boy camera accessory and a calendar feature so that I can save all of my important dates from junior high. Nice. And there's a toy box, which includes stuff like a fortune teller. All that extra stuff. I mean, I guess the challenge mode and the race thing's kind of cool, but the rest of it just sort of felt like unnecessary padding, as the real money is the original game. And if we're talking about portable ports of Super Mario Bros., just a couple years later, on June 2nd of 2004, what saw the release of the Classic Series version of Super Mario Bros. Now, I'm not going to show any of the footage here because the footage itself looks very glitchy when I try to capture it through my shmemulator, and I can't find my physical copy of it anywhere. On an actual Game Boy Advance, it runs fine, albeit, maybe a bit squashed due to the 3:2 aspect ratio. But again, it runs well, though your mileage may vary depending on like how you like the controls to feel. If you use like the classic Game Boy or the Game Boy SP, I've noticed, I personally think like the SP's buttons are like just maybe a little too clicky. It's kind of hard to quantify, but it doesn't have that same softness that the original Game Boy Advance has. But regardless, it's an okay version to have. Though if we're talking about ports, we got to talk about the NES Classic Edition, which released November 11th, 2016, because it has Super Mario Bros. As one of the 30 games. And what's really cool about this is that it even has an NES controller. These feel very, very close to how the OG ones felt. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it was a very close facsimile. Of course, the cord was just way too freaking short. But with this, as well as having a ROM of the original Super Mario Bros., it feels good, though your mileage may vary when it comes to stuff like input lag. I felt that it was pretty fair and pretty close to the original. And if we're talking about like a ROM version of the game, we got to talk about Super Mario Bros. Presence in the Virtual Console. And I'm going to start off with Animal Crossing on the GameCube, because it was an unlockable for that game. I think it was one of 19 games for Animal Crossing. Again, GameCube version released September 16th, 2002. Though you did need a Game Shark or an action replay to be able to unlock Super Mario Bros. On Animal Crossing. Regardless, hey, it's on there. And speaking of being on there, it is on the Wii Virtual Console, which of course released when the system came out, December 2nd, 2006. This Virtual Console version, it was really good, especially if you had one of the classic controllers for the Wii, or even the Pro version of it. I didn't like using the Wii remotes for control. It has the D-pad as well as A and B. Still not the same thing. The classic controller was really great for that. Again, minimal input lag. The game looked pretty decent. Another version of that is on Super Smash Bros. Brawl. That's right, as part of the Masterpieces section. It's a glorified demo section to see, hey, this is where all of these characters had originated from. And you could play the OG Super Mario Bros. For 30 seconds. And of course, Smash Brawl came out March 9th, 2008. So if you want your 30-second taste of Super Mario Bros., there you are. It also appeared on the Wii U's Virtual Console September 19th, 2013. Though a couple things with the Wii U one, I don't know if I'm going crazy or not, but I felt the input lag for the Wii U version Virtual Console was a bit worse. I can't put my finger on it. Again, controls just fine with like the Pro Controller for the Wii U, or if you could use the Wii version of the Pro Controller. Again, it's fine, but just something with the input lag on the Wii U version. And I would have expected it to be better because, hey, it's an HD console, supposed to be more powerful, but no, it was worse. Couldn't explain why. The Nintendo 3DS got a Virtual Console version of it as well. One through the 3DS Ambassador program, September 2011. And then, of course, through the general Virtual Console, February 16th, 2012. I noticed the colors look a little bit off, maybe a little bit lighter, but I mean, it feels good. The D-pad on the 3DS is okay. And, the buttons are a little bit more clickier on the 3DS than what I'd like. But again, hey, it does the task, does the job pretty well. And of course, the last version that I'll mention is Nintendo Switch's NSO service. That was added on September 18th, 2018, and it is excellent. But I will say, I really wish Nintendo would allow display options to remove those annoying sidebars. I know I'm playing the NSO version of it. You don't have to remind me with those sidebars, especially having my icon in the upper left-hand corner. I know who I am. Thank you. So beyond the Virtual Console versions of Super Mario Bros., there are a number of aspects on surprisingly newer releases of video games. One of the oldest ones of that is within the WarioWare series, such as in Twisted and Gold. And what's really cool is with Twisted, I love that it's sort of like a boss level. It has 3 different levels, and it's almost like Mario is running forward on like a twisting screen. It was definitely a very cool way to be able to play a few of these Mario levels. I thought that was done really well. And speaking of different versions, we have the Speed Mario Brothers that is within the Ultimate NES Remix on the 3DS. This is roughly the same version that we have as the original, although it is 2 times as fast for I guess to really appease or appeal to those speedrunners. Maybe that's Nintendo's way of a sick joke or a funny nod to those that like to finish their games quickly. They say, hey, we've doubled the speed. Let's see how fast that you can beat it. And speaking of the NES remix, there was also Super Luigi Brothers that was on the NES Remix 2 that was on the Wii U. And this is pretty much, again, the same version as the original, except you play as Luigi, and the entire game is mirrored. It's flipped. Instead of going from like left to right, you got to go from right to left. It's a pretty cool and crazy concept. And it's funny how much, like, if you really know the game, if you can adapt to the mirrored aspect, you can just like be able to get it so quick. It feels like eating with the wrong hand, but like if you can get used to that, then it's not that big a deal, not that bad. Also, talking about the Wii U and Super Mario Brothers content, we got to talk about Super Mario Maker. That this one released September 11th of 2015, and if we're going to talk about Mario Maker, we got to talk about Mario Maker 2 that released June 28th, 2019. The physics of these, honestly, it feels more like Super Mario Bros. 3 than anything. Examples of that sort of feel like how free it feels for Mario to move when he jumps, as well as how much air he gets when he jumps on an enemy and bounces up. That's kind of how the Super Mario Bros. 1 version of both of these feel. Otherwise, I mean, aesthetically, it looks just like it. And of course, what I want for Nintendo to do is a widescreen version of these games. So again, Nintendo, if you're listening, I hope you release widescreen versions of the original Mario games and the Super Nintendo games too. And if we're talking about these two, and especially the Switch version, we have to mention Super Mario Bros. 35. That released October 1st, 2020 for a limited 6-month period. Again, sort of mirrors the physics and feel as what we had with Super Mario Maker 2. That one, of course, is a battle royale game where you are pitted against 34 other Marios to see who can last the longest. Everybody was clamoring for that game, and or everybody still is clamoring for this game. And honestly, I played my fill of it. I'm okay. We don't have to bring it back. I probably had played maybe about 10, 15 hours of it. There's only so many times that you can play World 1-1. Like, seriously. And about 2/3 of the time, that's what it was. It was fun. It was also fun competing against other people. But again, how many times can we compete in the same levels? It would have been great if they added additional levels from Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan, or even really high voted fan levels from Super Mario Maker 2, or even levels from Super Mario Bros. 3 that are downgraded to Super Mario Bros. 1 aesthetically. There was a lot that they could have done with it, but I don't think that they were planning on doing that, which is fine, I guess. And then, of course, if we're talking about the Switch, we've got the Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. This has Super Mario Brothers as one of the, I think it's like 13 games, NES games that have challenges in this. It's essentially the ROM for the Virtual Console version of Super Mario Brothers, except having limiters there to prevent the player from going any further than the tasks on hand. It's fine. This was fine. I really wish it was more like the OG NES World Championship Edition. I think I've talked about that before on a recent video, so not gonna horse a dead beat. Again, this released on July 18th, 2024. It was still a nice artifact and callback to the original. I'm not sure what that was. Anyway, if I was asked which are the best, I'm gonna hit you guys with two. There's two versions of Super Mario Brothers that are the best. That is the original NES one and the Super NES one of Super Mario All-Stars. The original is a timeless classic, warts and all. Some of these warts, of course, as I mentioned, too many extra lives, causing game overs. And others are more interesting curios, like the Minus World, or even the different versions or variations of the Minus World. Beyond that, of course, it's classic Mario gameplay. You can't go wrong. A lot of those warts and issues were all cleansed and cleaned with the Super Mario All-Stars version. And I do think maybe perhaps it course corrects a little too much on some things, such as the tweaks to physics, but otherwise it's a great version to play. If you're a newer gamer, I recommend going with the NSO version of Super Mario All-Stars. If you enjoyed that enough, I recommend moving on to the NES version that's on the NSO service. Otherwise, if you have the resources, I would recommend playing the original NES and SNES consoles with the cartridges. I mean, come on, you can't go wrong with the original here. And the best experience that I've had insofar is, like, there's no real input lag. Again, it's not bad at all. I don't think it's that bad on the Virtual Console stuff, but if you play the original on the consoles, the NES or SNES, and then move to like a Virtual Console type system, you will notice a lag. At least that's been my experience. Again, this one is my favorite, but I'm old, and this is the first one that I played. And there are a lot of merits to some of the other ones that I mentioned, such as the Super Mario Bros. 35. I enjoyed that a ton. Now, I didn't have any time for any of the fan-made versions of Super Mario Bros. There are a lot of interesting ones out there, but if you're curious, you could